They always saw me as Eric's sweet old mom, a gentle widow who made lemon pies, handed out quarters to the grandkids, and kept her mouth shut. But what they didn't see, what they never cared to see, was everything I gave up so they could stand where they stand. And what do you do when the son you raised turns around and says, "She owes me"? It's been over a decade since my husband passed. I still remember the weight of his hand in mine, the smell of pipe tobacco on his collar, the way he used to laugh at his own bad jokes. After he died, I kept our home exactly the way he left it. Our 2-story brick house with the wraparound porch and his rose garden in the back. Everything had meaning. Every creaky floorboard, every teacup. It was the house we built together. Quite literally, with sweat, arguments, and a shared dream. Then came Eric, my youngest. Fresh from a bitter divorce, with a 6-year-old son in tow. He looked tired, hollow. "Just until I get on my feet." "Mom," he said. I didn't hesitate. I gave him the master bedroom. I moved into the small sewing room downstairs without a word. I cooked every meal, folded their laundry, took care of my grandson when Eric was out working late shifts or, let's be honest, just needed a break. And when Eric said he wanted to start a used auto parts business, I opened my savings and handed him $38,000. That was my retirement cushion. I never asked for it back. I never would. I told myself that's what mothers do. People used to tell me I was too soft. I shrugged it off. I figured love would be enough. When the water heater broke, I paid. When the car needed new tires, I paid. When my grandson needed tutoring, I rearranged my grocery budget. I even cut down on the loose-leaf Earl Grey my husband and I used to splurge on. And through it all, I told myself, he's just going through a hard time. He'll remember what you've done for him. You're not invisible. He sees you. But I would soon learn the truth. He didn't see me. He only saw the house and what he planned to do with it. I couldn't have imagined in my worst dreams. The first sign should have been how Eric started introducing me. Not my mom. Not "This is Ruth," just, "She lives here with us." With us. Like I was a guest. He said it so casually. One night, his friend from the auto shop came over for barbecue in the backyard. I brought out a tray of lemonade, and Eric waved a hand like I was part of the scenery. "That's my mom. She stays downstairs. I stay downstairs. Like a tenant. Like a shadow in my own home." He had started acting like the house was his. He adjusted the thermostat without asking. Painted the kitchen cabinets. Put new locks on the side door. And handed me a copy without so much as a "buy your leave." When I asked if everything was okay, he said, "I'm just making things more manageable." "Mom, you don't need to worry about the little stuff." But it was never about little stuff. It was the way he made decisions for me. Not with me. Then came the papers. He slid them across the kitchen table one evening after dinner. Said it was just legal housekeeping. Something about making it easier to refinance the business loan. It doesn't change anything. "Mom, just some technical stuff so I can handle bills in case something ever happens to you." It didn't sound quite right, but he'd caught me off guard. And the words, "in case something happens to you," were just ominous enough to silence me. I signed. I didn't know I was giving him full durable power of attorney and co-ownership of the house. If you've ever been guilted into signing something you didn't fully understand, if your love for someone blinded you just enough to not read the fine print, I want you to know, you're not alone. Drop it in the comments if that moment still sits heavy with you. I understand. I've lived it. A week later, I overheard him on the phone. He wasn't whispering. "Yeah, we'll sell in spring. Market's hot. I've got a guy lined up. Don't worry. It's already half in my name." My heart thudded in my chest. He was talking about our home. My home. The house his father and I built brick by brick. And just like that, I became invisible in my own life. Not mother. Not partner. Not protector. Just an obstacle to be moved. And I didn't know it yet, but things were about to go from painful to unforgivable. The phone call wasn't supposed to still be going. Eric had just hung up, or so he thought, after sweet-talking me into covering my grandson's car repair. $700. "Mom!" Just until his next paycheck. "You're a lifesaver." I said yes. Of course I said yes. That's what mothers do. He said, "Love you." And I replied the same. Then I set the phone down on the kitchen counter and reached for the kettle. But the line was still open. At first, just muffled rustling. Then, voices. "She bought it." "Again," Eric said, chuckling. "Hook." Line. and sinker. The room felt colder. Once we get her to sign the final release, the place is ours. We'll flip it and finally get out of this dump, he added. Then a different voice. My grandson, she's too soft in the head to figure it out. Always has been. It's like babysitting a bag of old habit. They laughed. My son, my grandson, talking about me like I was a tool, a burden, something to manage and eventually remove. Then Eric again, quieter, but sharper. We'll move her into that care home Sarah found, the cheap one. She doesn't need space. She needs supervision. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My hands trembled as I reached for the phone and ended the call. Not with rage, with something colder. The silence after betrayal is different. It isn't empty. It echoes. It plays everything back in your head, every moment, every sacrifice, every meal, every dollar handed over without question. And suddenly, it all feels like a lie. I sat there for a long time, not crying. I wasn't sad. I was deleted. They didn't just want my house. They wanted me out of it. My love, my care, my role had all been reduced to a signature on paper. To them, I wasn't mom. I was inventory. If you've ever had that moment where love turns to strategy and your worth becomes conditional, you're not crazy for feeling broken. You're not weak for believing too long. You're human. And in that moment, so was I. But something else began to stir. Not revenge. Not yet. Just the realization. If they were ready to erase me, then it was time I stopped letting them write the story. I didn't sleep that night. Not a minute. The house, my house, felt colder than I'd ever known it. The walls, once warm with memory, now echoed with betrayal. I wandered room to room, touching things that used to mean something. Arthur's armchair, the frame of Eric's high school diploma, a chipped teacup from the day he got his first job. They all felt like props now, set pieces in a play I'd been written out of. By morning, I wasn't angry. I was done. I called Martha, my old friend from church. She used to practice elder law before she retired, sharp as ever. I didn't mince words. I told her everything, about the papers, the overheard call, the power of attorney I'd signed without knowing what it meant. She was quiet for a beat. Then she said, Ruth, you need a real lawyer. Now, and you don't say another word to Eric. She gave me a name, a kind, steady man named Mr. Greer. Still practicing down in Franklin, I called him that same afternoon. He listened, really listened. Not like a lawyer, like someone who had a mother of his own. When I finished, he sighed. Unfortunately, this kind of thing happens more often than you'd think. But Ruth, you are not powerless. That sentence hit me hard. I'd felt powerless for so long, like my life was shrinking in on itself, like I was just waiting around to be moved out, packed up, and forgotten. But now, for the first time in years, I felt the faintest stirrings of control. I hung up the phone, walked to the bathroom mirror, and looked at myself. Not the mother, not the maid, just me. 76, wrinkled, bone-tired, but not stupid and not done. I think that's the part they never understood. Quiet doesn't mean weak. Love doesn't mean blind. And trust doesn't mean surrender. If you've ever had that moment where you stop begging to be seen and start seeing yourself again, then you know it doesn't roar, it doesn't explode. It clicks like a key turning in a long rusted lock. And in that moment, I knew this story wasn't going to end with me being erased. It would end when I said it would. The first thing I did was walk into the bank and shut down every joint account. The teller looked surprised when I slid my ID and said, I'd like to remove my son from everything, but I didn't flinch. Then came the passwords, new phone, new email. I even bought a small lockbox for my legal documents. Tucked it under the bed in the guest room at the new apartment I was renting across town. It was a one-bedroom over a coffee shop, nothing fancy, but quiet. Clean, mine. I didn't tell Eric I was moving. I didn't owe him that. I called Mr. Greer back, and we got to work. The power of attorney. Revoked. The deed, legally challenged based on manipulation and lack of full mental clarity at the time of signing. New will, new directives, every legal window they thought was open. Shut silently. What they didn't realize was that they'd spent years building their little plan, and I could dismantle it in weeks. And I did. Not with rage. Not with threats. With a ballpoint pen and the truth. I sold a few antiques, things that once reminded me of Arthur. but now felt like relics of a past I needed to set down. I used the money to sign up for a watercolor class at the senior center. I hadn't picked up a brush in 50 years. But oh, the colors. They poured out of me like they'd been waiting. I also joined a book club, the kind where people actually talk about the characters like they're old friends, and no one interrupts to ask for rent money or a car repair. Every Thursday, I made tea just for me. Chamomile, in my favorite cup. No need to ask if anyone else wanted some. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel selfish. I felt sovereign. That's the part no one talks about. How healing starts quietly. It doesn't look like fireworks or applause. It looks like learning to walk through a grocery store without guilt. Like sleeping through the night without waiting for a knock on your door. If you've ever rebuilt yourself from nothing, not for show, but for peace, you understand? I wasn't just healing. I was remembering who I was before the world told me who to be. And once I remembered, I made sure I'd never forget again. I didn't hear from Eric for months. Not after the papers were filed. Not after the title was frozen. Not after the money dried up. I imagine he was too busy scrambling, trying to undo what he never saw coming. One afternoon, I saw him. Not in person, online. A friend from church sent me a real estate flyer. "Didn't you used to live at this address?" she asked. There it was, my old house. On the market, empty, but not sold. I smiled to myself. Let them try. I had moved on, quite literally. My little apartment above the coffee shop was filled now. Paintings on the walls. Tea towels that made me laugh, and not a single thing I didn't choose to keep. I didn't need to reclaim the past. I just needed to protect my future. Then, one cloudy afternoon in November, I got a knock on the door. I opened it to find Olivia, my granddaughter, standing there with a pie and shaking hands and tears in her eyes. I'm sorry. Grandma! I didn't know how to face you. I didn't rush to forgive her, but I did make tea. We sat by the window while she cried and told me everything. How she started seeing it all for what it was after I left. How she got a job, started saving, stopped asking for handouts. I didn't come to ask for anything, she said. I just wanted to tell you that I miss you. I didn't promise anything, but I did tell her. You showed up. That's more than most ever do. She visits now, once in a while, quietly, respectfully. And that's enough. Eric never came, and I stopped waiting for him. That's what people don't understand. Closure doesn't come from apology. It comes from peace, from living well. I still walk to the library every Saturday. Paint on Tuesdays. Bake when it rains. And when I pass a mirror, I nod to the woman looking back. She's been through the fire. And she didn't scream. She just walked out, carrying her own light. If this story touched something in you, if you've ever felt erased, overlooked, or quietly discarded, drop a below. Tell me your story. Or simply say, I see myself in Ruth. Because sometimes the strongest thing we can do is live on our own terms and never look back.